Welcome back to Brain Chatter, where we listen past the daily noise and explore topics at the intersection of leadership, workplace culture, profit, and sustainability. I'm your host, Derek Brown. Today's topic is generative AI and workplace culture. The right choices provide an edge. We've seen a barrage of coverage and speculation in the media, traditional media and social media, about what impacts AI, or artificial intelligence, is supposed to have on business in America and worldwide. There has been so much coverage, interest, hype, and speculation, in fact, that it is difficult to comprehend what is realistic, legitimate, or even most important about AI. In our recent Brain Chatter podcast episode, we explored the basics of AI with Randy Sparkman. In this episode, we delve into a major dimension of AI. Today, we have a national corporate expert to talk us through a critical piece of this, and that is, how will it transform the work of both company employees and company leaders, and how will it impact company cultures? Particularly, how company leaders should be making AI decisions that give them a competitive edge. This expert has been analyzing this very question and crafting strategy advice and applications around it for one of the cornerstone giants of corporate America, a very large consulting firm with over 75,000 employees. His name is Michael Mendola, and I'm certain you are going to find what he has to say in this interview fascinating, practical, and enlightening. Michael, thank you for your valuable time, and welcome to Brain Chatter.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Well, let's start with a fundamental question. Will you clearly define artificial intelligence, specifically generative AI?
Yeah, so artificial intelligence has been around for quite some time. Everyone uses some form of artificial intelligence in their daily lives. You're used to using it when Spotify makes recommendations for the next song to play, or your Apple Maps is trying to figure out what's the best route to take. Artificial intelligence is not new. It's really a way for computers to perform tasks that typically require human intelligence. Generative AI is a relatively newer subset of artificial intelligence that's really laser focused on creating net new content or data. It can generate text, it can generate images, it can create music, it can create any other type of content that you might not be thinking about off the top of your head. It can create using natural language. And so generative AI is really just that deep knowledge subset of the broader artificial intelligence umbrella.
Will you talk a little bit about the intersection of this generative AI and the workplace over the coming months and years ahead?
There's a lot that's coming with generative AI. And, typically artificial intelligence has required computer software programmers and engineers who truly understand how to build these models. That's the root of it. And artificial intelligence used to mean that you would train a model to do a specific task in a specific way. Generative AI is now enabling access to artificial intelligence in a way that's never really been seen before. So now people can, in the workforce, use generative AI right at their fingertips with natural language to create the things that they need to do. ChatGPT was released, which really was the first evolution of generative AI that we're seeing now. And right when it got released, I started playing with it to write my emails, draft agendas for me, use it as a thought partner, which is a concept I'll elaborate on over the course of this interview. But generative AI in the workforce is transforming the way that people get work done. It's not replacing jobs. It's really enabling people to work differently, to work more efficiently, and to actually create a lot of value that wouldn't have been there otherwise.
You've built out a knowledge base, a very large knowledge base that your consulting firm is sharing online through an online blog for clients, for prospective clients, and for anyone to access. This really puts you at the forefront of expertise sharing on this topic, and I'll link to the blog in the show notes so that anyone can go directly to all of this knowledge you've put together. Allow me to pull a quote from one of your posts. Quote, technological advances, surging investments, and the competition for talent are all working toward one thing. In 2024, artificial intelligence, AI, will start to fundamentally change how business gets done. It will impact how companies grow revenue, conduct everyday operations, engage customers and employees, build new business models, and more. End of quote. So, Michael, will you flesh out your point about how it ties into that third point, how artificial intelligence prioritizes the major issue of competition for talent in the modern workplace?
Yeah, that's an important point to hit on. It's one that's very close to what I'm getting to do day to day. I'm getting to drive how are we upskilling 75,000 people at our workforce to understand how to use generative AI, how to become savvy and responsible users of generative AI. And responsible is important too, but talent and people are desiring skills that they can use every day. They want to reimagine. People want to reimagine the way that they work. They don't want to necessarily do things the way that they have done it the last year. People are looking for efficiencies. People are looking to use their brains and use the skills because technology is only going to evolve even more and more. And so using these tools, getting access to generative AI, learning about what is generative AI at its core, and also understanding what are the responsible practices to use when you're activating these technologies is critical. What we've seen is that employee engagement has gone up. People are clamoring for more training, more education, and now that we've built a baseline at the company that I work for, a baseline understanding of what is generative AI, how do you use it responsibly. We're now giving all of our people access to our tools that they can use in their everyday work. People are looking for more opportunities to actually get more upskilling involvement. They're looking for other ways to engage. They're looking for how can you use generative AI to build imagery? How can you use it to write music beyond just the day-to-day tasks? People really believe that generative AI is a tool that they can use and actually take further than they originally thought. And I think once people open that door, it's hard to shut it. People are naturally curious. They want to know how they can use these tools to better their work life, but also they can use it in their personal life too, in a lot of different ways. And so to invest in the workforce, to educate people on how to use these tools, again, in a responsible manner is so critical. I was recently speaking with a group of college students at my alma mater, and I asked the teacher, I said, what is your stance in using generative AI in the classroom? And he was one of the proponents of using it because why limit people's access to a tool that they could access outside of the classroom in a real work-life scenario? And so you really need to make sure that you're putting guardrails around people to ensure that they're using the tools the way that they're meant to be used and that they're verifying the outputs. But why restrict it? They're going to get access to it one way or another. They're going to use these tools in their work. They're going to use it in the classroom. The goal is to really create the responsible use of these tools, making sure that they understand how to generate the outputs that they desire. That's what really is the most impactful thing that we can do, from my experience in the workforce, is education around these topics, not avoiding them, because again, they're only going to continue to improve and grow. We've seen all the transformative change in just a year that's taken place. It's only, I can't even imagine a year from now when we're listening back to this podcast, how much is going to be changed since then too.
Great and fascinating points. In one of your blog posts, you note that generative artificial intelligence will transform the work of leaders as much as employees. Will you expand on what you mean by this?
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. A lot of times what we see is younger staff tend to gravitate towards new tools. And I think that that's just a natural evolution of society. People who are younger than me know about social media platforms and tools that I'm not aware of. And I probably know a lot about technology that my parents weren't aware of. And so it's a societal change and evolution that younger people entering the workforce will naturally gravitate towards wanting to use technology more frequently. With generative AI, though, it's actually really burdensome to management to not understand the capabilities of generative AI. It only hurts them as managers and leaders and CEOs to not understand the impact that generative AI can have for their people and for their workforce. If you're not understanding how outputs are created, it's susceptible to risk and inaccuracy, that you as a manager need to make sure your understanding is right and you're verifying it is indeed accurate and that the source data does make sense. If you're not understanding how this content is generated, but your younger staff members are creating it this way, there's just inherent risk. And so it is really important for leaders and managers at large and small organizations to know about the technology, know how it can be used, know how it should be used, and more importantly, know how to review the outputs for for things like accuracy, for completeness, to make sure that they're not biased. That's what I think of when I envision leaders needing to understand. You don't need to know how to build a generative AI model, but you do need to make sure that you understand how to use it and how your people are using it, because the truth is they're likely going to get access to it one way or another. So it's best to be prepared.
That makes sense. As the COVID pandemic ramped up and workplaces started really hitting fast forward on certain technological adoption, such as using remote logins, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, etc., I personally know a number of people who had been nearing retirement who explained their decision to retire as basically, I'm not interested in learning all this new technology. I'm out. They represented jobs, and the ones that I know, in finance, heavy industry, and the federal government. I've even had a friend as recently as a few weeks ago say that their decision to take an early retirement buyout that will happen soon is a result of continued frustration at the continued clip of new technology adoption expected in what had been for very long a traditional role and predictable role. Do you think this fast-paced AI integration that is coming will have a similar impact even in a continued tightening of the overall labor pool?
I don't think that we've seen technology quite like generative AI advance as quickly as it has. I think that people should be prepared and understand the fundamentals on how to use these tools, because if you understand in theory how to prompt the technology, you're not just limiting yourself to understanding how to use a tool like ChatGPT, you're also enabling yourself to understand how to use more advanced tools like Microsoft Copilot, that's embedded within Microsoft Slides and Microsoft Excel and Microsoft Word. If you understand how to use it responsibly, the core tenets of generative AI, and how to prompt the technology, those three key ingredients, which there's a little bit of a learning curve, but it's not that drastic because the interface is just using natural language, just like you would instruct someone who is on your team to help you with a task. You'd want to give them a lot of detail. You'd want to be specific, provide examples of what you're looking for to make sure that they generate the output that you're desiring. It's no different in using generative AI. You really want to be thorough and precise and provide context to get the best output possible. And that's why I think that that skill gap, the generations who are going into retirement, understanding those core tenets, not necessarily, again, understanding how to build a large language model, more how do you use it to get the most value, isn't something that is all that steep of a learning curve once you get into it and get your hands on keyboard to practice a little bit. That skill gap can be closed relatively simply. Low threshold to get involved. And there's so much content out there to learn so quickly. A lot of great content out there. If anyone is thinking, man, I'm nearing the end of my journey, it's probably too late, I disagree. I think it's something that you could use personally after you end up retiring and whatnot too. The skills and the thought partner that you can use generative AI for applies much more broadly outside of a work environment.
Well, the knowledge base that you have put together is an incredible amount of information that is consumable by people who are kind of looking for, where do I start? What does this mean? What is your motivation for that knowledge base shared beyond just people inside your company? You're being generous with it to share it with everybody.
Yeah, there's definitely the aspect of hoping that people are engaged and hopefully it clicks. Generative AI, the word can be a little bit intimidating and you might not want to dive in. And I think a lot of the thought leadership that we're releasing is geared towards making it digestible, making it easy to understand and with use cases and a place to start. There's so much information out there that you could start with, and sometimes that's quite overwhelming. With the thought leadership that we're curating, it's really geared towards, oh, okay, this is what generative AI can be used for. That's great. Okay, oh, here's where I start as well. Using those two things hopefully does enable curiosity and continued evolution of learning and trying to get more involved. And honestly, it does provide permission to use the tools as well. Um, I'm never going to recommend just using one of the generative AI tools. There's so many potential options that exist, but it it almost gives folks permission to try, because again, you can learn all about prompting generative AI models all you want, but until you actually get hands-on experience doing it, that's when it really truly clicks. It's like riding a bike. You can read about how to ride a bike, but until you actually hop on and you start pedaling, that's when it really kicks into high gear. So the thought leadership that we're creating, just like you'd mentioned, definitely is meant to spark curiosity, but it is meant to also say, hey, here's where you can start. Go and try these tools out.
That makes a lot of sense, and it's very generous of you. One app that I use personally that leans heavily into AI is a free app from National Geographic called iNaturalist. I'll link to it in the show notes also. And as you probably know, if you've ever used it, it's for identifying all sorts of wild things. Once you've uploaded a photo, whether it's of a turtle or an oak tree leaf, it recommends to you what it thinks it is, but then it lets the community of users of the app come in and verify whether or not what you and artificial intelligence identified is accurate or not. How do you see the future of this human backup to artificial intelligence for various applications in the future? Do you think that will also always be a component, some sort of human verification, or will the knowledge base grow so much that eventually that component will not be needed as substantially?
I am a believer that there's always going to be a need for human intervention. I don't think that these tools are meant to be used without verification in some capacity. The truth is it's guessing what response to generate. It's just providing the best guess of the next word or the next content, the next image, based off of the millions and millions and millions of data points that these large language models are trained off of. And so I'm of the thought that you should always trust but verify. Trust that the output is correct, but you need to verify it. Humans still play a really critical role in the evolution of generative AI and AI in general. We're creating the models, we're training these using training data. You want to make sure that these models, that's where bias could come in if you're training it only using certain data points and excluding others. And so that's why I'm a big proponent of human intervention, especially in the review process as people use these tools. The rule of thumb is definitely trust but verify.
Over the past year, as interest rates have spiked and we've witnessed other governmental policies and economic changes, we've seen the tech industry across the United States and beyond go through multiple layers of layoffs. The founder of one successful and growing tech startup that allows remote work from anywhere and which only has a few hundred employees recently told my Rotary Club that his tech company had over 70,000 job applications for only a handful of vacancies in 2023. Do you anticipate that the surge of workers with some level of tech background or interest will be helpful in the speed of AI adoption if they are recruited into non-tech companies, as those non-tech companies realize they maybe need AI integration?
It's a great question. I had a leader of mine explain the artificial intelligence boom like this. It's almost like math getting a calculator. It's like when the calculator was invented, you used it to quickly do calculations and figure out the way to the formula and figure out the solution a lot quicker. The same could be said about generative AI. If you have some baseline understanding of it, you definitely won't be replaced by the technology. It's really just a tool in your tool belt to help you, again, create new content or bounce new ideas off of the generative AI model to come to the best solution. Those that understand how to use the technology likely will see results in getting hired, maybe progressing throughout their careers. But those who don't embrace it and understand it and try to use it likely are at risk to not progress as quickly because you're only hurting yourself. Again, it's like doing math without the calculator sometimes. And even though it's definitely thorough and you should understand how to do the calculations, having that calculator is handy. And so I view it the same way when getting access to these generative AI tools.
What advice would you give to a company leader, whether it's a small company or whether it's a very large company like the one you work with? We do expect for you to actively take on figuring out how to apply it to our company in a way that makes us more competitive.
Yeah, I think it starts with education. It starts with opportunities for upskilling. And as a leader, I would encourage all leaders to take that initiative to invest in your people. People will find use cases and ways to apply the technology into their day-to-day jobs. Break down that barrier by, again, providing your people with dedicated time and dedicated training content that they can take and then use the technology in ways that they didn't think about before. Rather than prescribing them, you should use generative AI to do this, this, and this. Sure, that might be a good starting point, but I think it's better to paint a broader stroke, build the baseline understanding, and build savvy and responsible users and enable them to find ways to fill the gaps in their day-to-day work using generative AI tools.
Let's turn our attention specifically to workplace cultures. What impact do you anticipate generative AI will have on workplace cultures?
That's an interesting question too. Again, I don't know that folks understand quite as much now that I've had a lot of experience with it. The way that you can use generative AI as a thought partner. For example, when I was preparing for this interview and this podcast, I used generative AI to figure out what are potential responses to some of the questions that I'm being asked. Like, what's another consideration that I'm not thinking about? And the model was able to provide me with different points of view that would also be important to communicate to. And so I think that workplace culture also could benefit from having a thought partner in your back pocket. I think the culture of a company actually will only grow when more efficiency is being created in day-to-day work. You're no longer having to spend, that extra 15 minutes trying to figure out how you want to write this email, how to make it more formal. You're not spending, an extra 2 hours creating a draft of all of your PowerPoint slides. You're no longer having to write out, take the meeting notes and transcribe them into a follow-up note that you could share with your team. Those are things that only will improve the workplace culture because now teams are able to focus more on the beneficial points of their day-to-day role. They're able to be more thought-provoking, less task-oriented. And I think that's where generative AI is going to play a huge boost in workplace culture, in creating new ideas, creating new points of view that weren't considered before that could be brought into the workforce as well. And it's just going to create a better overall experience for people and also create better outcomes for clients and customers.
We've mentioned a couple of applications that use artificial intelligence. When I talked about iNaturalist, when you talked about ChatGPT, are there any other specific applications that you have found particularly interesting or helpful or fascinating that you've been using most?
Yes, definitely a lot of them. And the ones that you mentioned definitely are great starting points, great places to go. Organizations like Microsoft and Google, what they're starting to do is integrate generative AI into the products that they have. And so one of the tools that I'm using now on a daily basis is called Microsoft Copilot. Microsoft Copilot is a generative AI tool built directly into each of the M365 applications. So when you're using Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, Excel, Microsoft Teams, and Microsoft Outlook for your emails, you're now able to use generative AI within each of those native applications. So if you need to create a new PowerPoint deck, you can use natural language using Microsoft Copilot. You can just type it in and ask it to generate 3 draft slides for your upcoming meeting on the benefits of generative AI. You can go to Microsoft Word and you can have it draft you talking points in a podcast style format that make it really easy to transcribe. And it will generate all that net new content there. If you're analyzing your Excel spreadsheets and you want to identify and highlight variances that are above a certain threshold, you can simply use natural language now within Copilot in Microsoft Excel to highlight those records and find those variances for you, rather than you having to do the formulas yourself. If you want to summarize that long email thread that you see, the 16 thread email that you want to summarize, you can use Microsoft Copilot and Outlook to summarize that email thread and give you the key points. When you're using your meetings, you're in a Teams meeting, for example, you can have the transcription feature turned on, and it will transcribe your meeting notes and output them for you in an easy to digest format that also has action items specifically laid out with the name of the responsible party who's assigned to that action item. These are the ways that generative AI are also being used. So, of course, there are tools like ChatGPT. There's DALL-E that creates amazing imagery. There's so many amazing tools out there. But I think tools like Microsoft Copilot, and I'm sure Google will release something as well, are really meant to be hyper efficient tools. They're meant to really make your job and the way that you deliver for your customers and your clients way faster to market, way faster and more efficient, and providing different ideas that you might not have considered if you were building them out manually. So definitely a tool that I'm passionate about, just like ChatGPT, also Microsoft Copilot.
Thank you. That's fascinating. Well, what about someone maybe who is not currently a business leader per se and not a techie per se, but is an employee in an organization and they see the opportunity? They want to leverage learning about generative AI to improve the trajectory and speed of trajectory of their own career. What is your advice for them? How do they position themselves as, well, as Randy Sparkman said in our last podcast episode, the evangelist or the Sherpa for my company or my department?
The most successful people are going to be curious people. Will tend to probably outperform those who aren't really curious, because there's a certain element of caring that goes on. And so my advice is, if you are genuinely curious, really do that upskilling that's required to enable you to become a leader and be viewed as a go-to person for these types of tools. A quick example, I am a certified public accountant by trade. I started in our tax practice at the consulting firm in which I work, and I navigated, out of curiosity, ways to make processes more efficient using technology tools. A lot of it was self-taught. Our company is amazing and did provide me plentiful amounts of opportunities to upskill and learn with dedicated time. And through that, I found my way into being fascinated once again by generative AI last November when it came out. And out of that curiosity led me to learn about it, listen to podcasts, read the articles, look at thought leaders and technology magazines and publications that I follow, and allow me to frame my point of view on how these tools could be used. And then I went and shared that insight with my leaders. I showed them just how amazing a tool like ChatGPT is and how it can be used in a real life example for a project. Obviously, no client data, just internal content that I was using, but just showing how powerful that could be for the task that I was trying to complete. And I think that really sparked this wave of, oh my gosh, that's possible. What else is possible? And so now here I am a year later, helping to work on a team that's bringing generative AI education and opportunities to life at the company in which I work, and also for our clients to also take on that same role. It was all built on the foundation of being curious and open-minded, and just taking the time to do the research. It wasn't ordered upon me. I wasn't assigned the opportunity to dive into this. It was just curiosity that led the way. That applies for so many different facets of life, but definitely the generative AI role if you're looking to promote that internally within your organization as well.
Excellent advice. Not long ago, the co-founder of a news site, Axios, Mike Allen, spoke at my Rotary Club also. And from that conversation, he left everybody a copy of his book, Smart Brevity. And from that, I pulled a quote that one of the Axios writers, Scott Rosenberg, has. And here's the quote: "The more our understanding of new technology is distorted by hype, the less thoughtfully we can apply it, and the more likely it is we will cause harm with it." He adds, "Today's AI promoters are trying to have it both ways. They insist that AI is crossing a profound boundary into untrodden territory with unfathomable risks. But they also define AI so broadly as to include almost any large-scale, statistically driven computer program." As one personal example from me, I've noticed that some of the apps I have normally used, or that I have used for quite some time, have suddenly changed their name to include AI, but nothing else has changed noticeably, such as the app TinyScan, now switching their name to Tiny AI Scan. What are your takeaways from this, the hype component?
Yeah, that's interesting too. There's, like anything, when I remember cryptocurrency was a hype cycle technology and currency platform that really generated a lot of interest. And when it was hot, everyone was trying to transform. So definitely understand the AI hype cycle as well. The the true tools that help to get jobs done are going to be the most useful. But it really boils down again to education around um, helping to demystify what these tools are, but also what they aren't. I work for amazing leaders, and they're very transparent and open about wanting us to understand the fundamentals of generative AI, but more importantly, too, just along with it, the responsible use of generative AI. So understanding what these tools are and are not is critical. So you can quickly diffuse and demystify a tool that has AI in the name but truly isn't using it rather quickly when you're educated and have some foundational knowledge of the technology and what it's capable of. You can quickly spot it and say, well, they have AI in their name, but I don't know that they're really providing the value that they think that they are when comparing it to a tool that truly is built off of a large language model. Doesn't mean that these tools might not be useful, but yeah, definitely wish that there wasn't all this distortion out there in the market of tools that could potentially be thought of as AI capabilities, but they're really not. So again, it boils down to having amazing leaders who understand the importance of dedicated time to upskill and learn the foundations of these technologies.
Well, let's talk more about you. So you're a certified public accountant. You are now taking on this major AI role for a large corporation. What are some of your future interests, and how do you see this impacting the trajectory of your own career?
It's definitely been an amazing past year. Again, I was given an opportunity to be on a team of folks who are responsible for delivering learning content to all 75,000 people at the company that I work for. And a lot of that has been a learning experience, and it's been extremely beneficial. And again, I can't emphasize enough the leaders that I work for are all supportive and amazing individuals and professionals. So the development there has been quite amazing. I think that again, learning these technologies improves your skill set and your marketability within your organization. It only will help me continue to progress in my career, helping our firm better understand how to use these technologies, helping our clients understand what they're capable of doing as well. I think we're at the tip of the iceberg still right now. Again, it's crazy to me to think that just a year ago, ChatGPT was released and all this has happened since that point in time. So it's hard to say a year from now where we're going to be when these technologies continue to get smarter and more sophisticated. But I know at the core of it, my career will be rooted in helping our company become better and scaling generative AI solutions to make people's lives and work lives more efficient and easier and more productive. And then also helping our clients do that same thing, taking the lessons that we've learned and applying them to our clients' organizations to help them mimic similar patterns and create similar outputs that we've seen. That's probably the trajectory that I'm looking at now.
Well, you also mentioned earlier that your alma mater, and remind me, which school is that?
Oh, the proud Miami of Ohio, Miami University, a school before Florida was a state.
Very nice. You mentioned that you were asked to come back on campus and share some of your knowledge with students. What was some of your advice that you gave to those students to whom you spoke about the future of AI and how it's likely to impact their career, and how to position that knowledge and information in interviews?
I've since stepped away a little bit from using my CPA in a traditional sense. I still maintain it. I am a certified public accountant, and I care a lot about the accounting profession. So if I use that as an example, the accounting profession is typically a little bit later to the game with certain technology components. And so I'm a big proponent of the future of accounting needs to be driven off of technology and tools that can manipulate data and extract outputs more quickly. Um, so much of our profession is built around rules and regulations. And so there's a framework there to build off of. You can build these rules into models like generative AI models to create the outputs that are desired. I think that students understand that too. No longer is it quite as important to memorize every line of the book when you now have a tool that can also help you get those insights and allow you to focus on providing more consultative advice rather than just providing an output that you're used to providing. So I think students, my encouragement when I go to campus has been understand these technologies because now is that time that's so fundamental when you're still building up your education base when you're in school. Take that time because when you enter the workforce, it's a little bit of a struggle to get up to speed with all the coworkers who have been there for, many more years than you have if you're just starting off fresh. And so my advice is always jump in and get some baseline understanding of how these technologies can impact the way that you do your schoolwork so that you're prepared for entering the workforce ahead of your peers. Get that knowledge and understanding and also the hands-on skills that you can. What's amazing about today, even when I was in school too, like YouTube education was really beneficial. There's videos that can teach you how to do just about anything. I was sanding a table today. I didn't know how to do that. I looked at YouTube and it taught me how to do that in 3 minutes. I just think that there's so much power in understanding where to go for sources of information and applying them. And if you're a student and you're listening, I would highly encourage you to go look at the fundamentals of generative AI, the responsible use of generative AI trainings that are all available online. View our thought leadership as well, and understand how it could be applied in a business setting. So that way, when you are in an interview, when you are talking to someone who hopefully also understands the power and the transformative nature of generative AI, you can bring that up in that interview as well and explain how you've used it on a school project to create a brand new output that wouldn't have otherwise been created. If you can explain ways that you're using these tools and make it click for the person that's interviewing you, that's really going to give you an upper hand when entering into that job market. I'm interviewing candidates quite often, and one of the things I look for is practical use cases of knowing that you've applied a tool or you've been in a situation that would make me comfortable to put you on the project and use the tool in the same way. So just some advice for those who might be entering the workforce.
Excellent advice. Well, one thing that you've mentioned or touched on a couple of different points in the interview is the ethical components. And let's talk about that for just a moment. One of the reasons that Google gave for not releasing their version of AI sooner, now called Bard, was the ethical component that they were working around. Can you say more about how you see the ethical component and what a business leader really needs to be aware of as it relates to ethics and AI?
Yeah, ethics play a big role no matter what tool you're using. Being ethical, acting responsibly is always really important. And so um, AI models are prone to bias because they are still created by humans. Humans have input into the models to determine the data sources that are used to create the outputs that you and I might use the model for. The model itself isn't inherently biased. There are ways to make a model biased if you only upload, one side of the fact pattern and not the other side intentionally, because that's your point of view. Well, then that model is prone to being a biased model, and that output might not be as accurate and as complete as it's made out to be. And so, ethical use of these tools is critical. You have to be understanding that the model may seem like it understands what it's saying and understands all the concepts that you're providing it. But the truth is, it's just trained on so much data. It's like talking to someone that's done everything in every way in every situation. And that's why we're just so prone to trusting it, just saying, well, how could that be wrong? Well, the truth is it's still just guessing off of that data that it's trained on what the best next word should be in the output. It doesn't actually know what it's producing. And so that's why it's so critical to thoroughly review the outputs of the models that you're provided, making sure that it's up to your brand standards so it doesn't jeopardize and harm your organization's perception within the marketplace. You want to make sure that these outputs are truly representative of the organization that you work for and that they're up to the same standards. The way that I can ensure that it's being ethically used is truly to verify that my outputs are indeed correct. Maybe even providing it examples when I'm interacting with the generative AI model to make sure that it isn't providing me a biased response. If a generative AI model doesn't know the answer, it can lie to you. It will just provide an answer for you. And so it could be even as something as simple as instructing the model when you're using it to, hey, if you don't know the answer, just specify that you do not know. Don't make it up. And so that's how you can use these models ethically to make sure that they're not just going to provide you non-factual information that really isn't useful.
Truly fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. As we wrap up our interview, what have I not asked you that I should have asked you, or what would you add that's a key piece of information for somebody who's a business leader and really trying to wrap their mind around AI?
Since I'm not necessarily in a leadership role at an organization, I have this different perspective to offer to leaders who might be listening. And that is to really encourage your people to take that step. That step of encouragement means the world to your staff, to give them the go ahead to openly use these tools in a responsible way goes such a long way into getting curiosity built up and getting these tools into the hands of people to produce the outputs that make things more efficient. I can't emphasize that enough as someone who has tremendous leadership, who's supportive of that, has really enabled me in my career to explore the different use cases rather than just acting alone. Given permission to do it really helps me to think outside of the box, think a little bit more curiously with all technology, not even just artificial intelligence or generative AI. It'll be the next thing too, knowing that there's leadership support for me to go and execute and try some of these things out is really beneficial for me. It's been beneficial in my career. And I think you'd find benefit as well for the people on your teams to also find value. Give them the permission to act and to learn and to use these tools in their day-to-day roles.
Thank you very much. And thank you for your vast array of valuable and practical insights, and just in general for sharing your valuable time with the listeners of this podcast and with me. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys for having me.
Absolutely. And I will link to the resources mentioned, including this incredible knowledge base that you've built out on artificial intelligence, in the show notes at brainchatterpodcast.com. And with your permission, I'll also include a link to your LinkedIn in case someone wants to connect with you.
That sounds great. Yeah, please add me on LinkedIn. Would be happy to connect. Definitely open to chat. And again, just thank you for listening and the time.
Brain Chatter is a production of Ken Chapman & Associates Incorporated. We assist clients across North America and beyond with leadership development, corporate culture transformation initiatives, behavior-based professional development for health and safety issues, individual and team assessments, conflict and performance management, succession planning, and team building, making a difference in organizations and individuals' lives for over 40 years. Please, if you don't mind, leave a review or ranking for us wherever you listen to podcasts, because the artificial intelligence will then in turn recommend us to additional new listeners. Thank you for your time.